"We've decided to merge your role with someone younger," Eleva said, her voice cutting through the sterile conference room like a scalpel. I sat there, hands folded, watching her deliver what she clearly thought was my death sentence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her angular face as she leaned back in her chair with smug satisfaction. "My name is Claudia Remsen, and I'm 52 years old. For the past 14 years, I've been the Senior Director of Biomedical Innovation at Meditech Fusion Labs here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've spent more than half my career building this diagnostics division from the ground up, turning abstract research into life-saving medical breakthroughs. My designs have accelerated our research timelines by 43% and attracted partnerships with universities across 3 continents. But apparently, none of that mattered to Elaine. She had been appointed department head of biomedical strategy just 6 months earlier, arriving with a Harvard MBA and an insufferable certainty that everything needed to be optimized. At 44, she spoke in corporate buzzwords and treated innovation like a spreadsheet problem. From day one, she'd made it clear that she viewed my experience as outdated baggage rather than institutional knowledge. "Jason will be absorbing your responsibilities," she continued, gesturing toward the young man sitting uncomfortably beside her. Jason Min was 28, fresh-faced, and undeniably talented. I'd actually recommended him for his current junior analyst position 2 years ago. He avoided my eyes now, staring down at his laptop screen as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "He's closer to current trends," Elaine added with a dismissive wave. "The industry is moving toward rapid execution and fresh thinking. We need someone who can keep pace with modern methodologies." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. 14 years of watching corporate politics had taught me that showing emotion in moments like this was exactly what people like Elaine wanted. She was waiting for me to protest, to plead, to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I nodded slowly. "Merging roles is efficient," I said calmly. "I trust the results will speak for themselves." Elaine's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if she'd expected more resistance. "Good. We'll announce the restructuring next week. Jason will officially take over your projects on the 15th. As I walked out of that conference room, I caught a glimpse of something troubling in Jason's expression, pure terror masked as professional composure. He understood exactly what had just happened, even if Elaine didn't. They weren't just eliminating my position, they were dismantling the foundation of everything I'd built. And somehow, I knew this decision would haunt them far sooner than they imagined. The irony wasn't lost on me as I cleared out my office that afternoon. 14 years of groundbreaking work reduced to 3 cardboard boxes and a dying succulent plant. I joined Meditech Fusion Labs when it was still a scrappy startup operating out of a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Raleigh. Marcus Ellington, our chief technology officer, had recruited me personally from a pharmaceutical giant in Research Triangle Park. "We're not just developing diagnostics," he told me during that first interview. "We're revolutionizing how medical research happens. I need someone who can think beyond traditional boundaries." Those words had resonated with me because I'd always been the type to push against limitations. Growing up as the daughter of a small-town doctor in eastern North Carolina, I'd watched my father struggle with outdated diagnostic equipment that delayed critical treatment decisions. That experience had shaped my entire career philosophy. Innovation should serve humanity, not corporate profit margins. Over the years, I'd transformed that philosophy into tangible results. The rapid screening protocols I developed had shortened diagnostic timelines from weeks to days. My research partnership program had brought in over $37 million in collaborative funding. Most importantly, my team's work had directly contributed to faster treatment options for patients dealing with autoimmune disorders and rare genetic conditions. But Elaine Voss saw none of that value. From the moment she'd arrived, she'd questioned every established process, dismissed years of institutional knowledge, and pushed for what she called disruptive innovation. In reality, her approach was chaos disguised as progress. She'd already alienated 2 of our most reliable research partners with her abrasive negotiation style and unrealistic timeline demands. Jason had tried to defend me during team meetings, pointing out that my protocols were still producing better results than anything our competitors had developed. But Elaine had made it clear that loyalty to outdated leadership wouldn't be tolerated in her new organizational structure. The kid was trapped between professional ethics and career survival, and unfortunately, survival usually won. My relationship with my colleagues had always been built on mutual respect rather than fear-based authority. I'd mentored dozens of young researchers over the years, helping them navigate the complex world of biomedical innovation. Many of them had gone on to leadership positions at other companies, creating a network of professional relationships that Elaine clearly didn't understand or value. As I packed the last of my research journals, I thought about the 3 major projects currently in development. The automated genetic sequencing system was 6 months from completion. The infectious disease rapid response platform was entering clinical trials. The personalized medicine diagnostics program was attracting interest from international pharmaceutical companies. All of these initiatives required deep institutional knowledge and carefully maintained relationships with external partners. Elaine believed that Jason's technical skills and enthusiasm could replace my years of experience and established connections. She was about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption was, and the education would be far more expensive than she could possibly imagine. The first warning sign came during the transition meeting 2 days later. Jason sat across from me in my soon-to-be former office, his notebook open and pen ready, but his hands were trembling slightly. We'd worked together for 2 years, and I'd never seen him this nervous. "Claudia, I have to be honest," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I'm ready for this level of responsibility." The genetic sequencing project alone involves partnerships with 7 different institutions. I've never managed anything close to that scope. I leaned back in my chair, studying his anxious expression. "Jason, you're a brilliant analyst. Your technical understanding of the underlying science is actually better than mine in some areas. But this isn't just about technical knowledge anymore." "What do you mean?" "When Dr. Harrison from Duke calls about protocol modifications, he's not just asking for scientific input. He's testing whether we still have the institutional stability to be reliable partners. When the clinical trial coordinators need timeline adjustments, they're looking for someone who understands the regulatory implications of every decision." These relationships took years to build. Jason's face had gone pale. Elaine said the technical aspects were the most important part. She thinks the relationship management is just networking fluff that anyone can handle. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. This was worse than I'd anticipated. Elaine wasn't just underestimating the complexity of my role, she was actively dismissing the most critical components of it. "Jason, have you told her about the upcoming review with the International Pharmaceutical Consortium?" "The what?" My heart sank. The consortium review was scheduled for 3 weeks from now, a make-or-break evaluation that would determine whether Meditech received a $48 million partnership contract. I'd been preparing for this review for 18 months, building relationships with key decision-makers and carefully positioning our research to align with their strategic goals. "There's a presentation scheduled for March 8th, I said slowly. "Representatives from 5 pharmaceutical companies will be evaluating our personalized medicine diagnostics program. This contract could fund our research for the next 4 years." Jason's pen had stopped moving entirely. Elaine never mentioned anything about that. She just said I'd be taking over your current projects and maintaining operational continuity. The phrase operational continuity would have been laughable if the situation weren't so serious. Elaine had reduced 14 years of strategic relationship building to a buzzword. She'd convinced herself that innovation happened in isolation, that partnerships were just administrative details that could be managed by anyone with a decent spreadsheet. "Jason, I need you to understand something," I said carefully. "When this transition happens, you're going to be under enormous pressure. If you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me." He nodded gratefully, but we both knew the reality. Once I was officially out, Elaine would make sure that any communication between us would be seen as undermining her authority. Jason would be completely on his own, managing responsibilities he didn't fully understand, representing a company whose leadership had just demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how biomedical research actually worked. As I watched him gather his notes and head back to his cubicle, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching the first domino in a chain reaction that would devastate everything I'd spent my career building. The official announcement came the following Monday morning. Elaine had scheduled an all-hands meeting in the main conference room, standing at the front with a PowerPoint presentation titled Organizational Excellence Through Strategic Restructuring. I sat in the back row, watching my colleagues' faces as she explained how my elimination would enhance operational efficiency and accelerate innovation pathways. As we move forward, Elaine said, clicking to a slide showing a simplified organizational chart, we're consolidating senior-level oversight to eliminate redundancies and empower our next generation of leaders. Jason Min will be assuming expanded responsibilities as our new Director of Biomedical Development. I noticed several of my former team members exchange worried glances. Dr. Patricia Reeves, our lead geneticist, raised her hand tentatively. What about the consortium review next month? Claudia has been the primary point of contact for that project. Elaine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. All existing relationships will transition seamlessly to our new leadership structure. Jason has been thoroughly briefed on all ongoing initiatives. That was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Jason himself looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. I'd seen that expression before. The deer-in-headlights look of someone who just realized they were in far deeper water than they'd understood. After the meeting, Marcus Ellington approached me in the hallway. At 60, he was one of the few people at Meditech who'd been there longer than I had. His weathered face showed genuine concern as he pulled me aside. "Claudia, I want you to know this decision didn't come through me," he said quietly. "I found out about it the same time as everyone else." "I figured as much," I replied. "This has Elaine's fingerprints all over it." Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair. "The board is backing her restructuring initiative. They think she's going to modernize our operations and improve our profit margins. I've tried to explain the value of institutional knowledge, but they're focused on quarterly projections." "What about the consortium contract?" His expression darkened. "That's what worries me most." "Do you really think Jason can handle that presentation?" I considered the question carefully. "Jason is brilliant, Marcus. Given 6 months of preparation and proper mentoring, he could probably handle it. But 3 weeks, with no background on the political dynamics between those companies? It's going to be a disaster. Can you help him unofficially?" I shook my head. Elaine made it very clear that my input won't be welcomed during the transition. She views any ongoing involvement as undermining her authority. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I've been thinking about your offer from Cresswell Electric's biotech division. Maybe it's time to seriously consider other opportunities." That caught my attention. 3 months earlier, I'd received a recruitment call from Cresswell Electric, a major technology company that was expanding into medical device development. They'd offered me a position as Chief Innovation Officer, heading up their new biomedical research initiative. At the time, I'd politely declined, feeling loyal to Meditech and the work we were doing. "They're still interested," I said slowly. "In fact, they called again last week." "What kind of resources are they offering?" "Unlimited research budget for the first 2 years, complete autonomy over project selection and team building, and they're specifically interested in rapid diagnostic development, exactly the kind of work I've been doing here." Marcus' eyebrows lifted. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It is. And here's the thing, Marcus. They've also expressed interest in acquiring some of the diagnostic protocols I've developed. Apparently, there's a gray area in my employment contract about intellectual property rights for innovations I created using my own methodologies. The implications hung in the air between us. Over the years, I developed several diagnostic protocols using research methodologies I'd created independently, often working on my own time with resources I'd personally secured. The legal department had never clarified whether those innovations belonged to me or to Meditech, assuming it would never become an issue. "Claudia," Marcus said carefully, "if you're thinking about leaving, you should probably have a lawyer review your employment contract." "Already done," I replied. Turns out, my intellectual property rights are much more extensive than Elaine realizes. The rapid screening protocols, the genetic sequencing algorithms, the infectious disease detection systems legally, I have legitimate claims to most of the innovations that make our diagnostics division competitive. Marcus' face had gone pale. Elaine doesn't know about this, does she? She never bothered to ask. She was so focused on eliminating my position that she never considered what I might take with me when I left. By Wednesday morning, the cracks were already beginning to show. I was officially working my final week, but I could see the panic building in Jason's eyes as he tried to manage responsibilities he'd never fully understood. The first crisis came during a routine conference call with our partners at Johns Hopkins University. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead researcher on our joint autoimmune diagnostics project, had called to discuss timeline modifications for their clinical trials. It should have been a straightforward conversation. I'd been working with Elena for 3 years, and we developed a collaborative rhythm that made these discussions efficient and productive. But Jason was fielding the call now, and I could hear the strain in his voice from my office down the hall. He was asking for clarification on basic protocol elements that Elena had assumed were already understood. More concerning, he was making commitments about resource allocation and timeline adjustments without understanding the broader implications for our other partnerships. 20 minutes into the call, Jason appeared in my doorway, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Claudia, Dr. Vasquez is asking about the integration protocols for the European Consortium data." I don't know what she's talking about. I glanced around to make sure Elaine wasn't within earshot, then quietly explained the background. 6 months ago, we agreed to share diagnostic protocols with 3 European research institutions. Elena's team is supposed to integrate their WV with the European data before the consortium review. It's a key component of our value proposition. How was I supposed to know that? It should have been in the transition documentation, I said gently. Did Elaine provide you with the partnership history files? Jason shook his head. She said I should focus on current technical requirements, not historical administrative details. I felt a chill run down my spine. Those historical administrative details represented millions of dollars in research investments and carefully negotiated agreements with international partners. Elaine had literally thrown away the institutional memory that held our entire collaborative network together. Jason, listen carefully, I said. You need to tell Dr. Vasquez that you'll follow up with detailed integration protocols by Friday. Then you need to go to Marcus and explain exactly what's happening. This is bigger than a missed phone call. After Jason left, I sat in my office, staring at my computer screen. 3 years of work with Elena's team, 2 years of negotiations with the European institutions, 18 months of preparation for the consortium review. All of it potentially destroyed because Elaine had convinced herself that relationships were just paperwork. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Claudia, this is Kevin Walsh from Cresswell Electric. We'd like to accelerate our timeline for discussion. Are you available for a conversation this afternoon?" I stared at the message for several minutes. Kevin Walsh was the director of strategic acquisitions at Cresswell Electric, the person who would be overseeing their expansion into biomedical technology. If he was reaching out directly, it meant they were serious about moving quickly. I typed back, "Available at 3 p.m. Call my direct line." The conversation that afternoon was everything I'd hoped it would be. Kevin confirmed that Cresswell Electric was prepared to offer me a position with complete creative control over their biomed research division. More importantly, they were interested in licensing the diagnostic protocols I developed, pending legal resolution of the intellectual property questions. "We've done our research," Claudia, Kevin said. "Your innovations have consistently outperformed anything else in the market. We're prepared to make this transition as attractive as possible. What kind of timeline are you thinking? We could have a formal offer ready by next week if you're interested. We'd like to bring you on board as soon as possible. Frankly, we've been monitoring some of the changes at Meditech, and we think this might be an ideal opportunity for both of us." As I hung up the phone, I realized that Elaine's strategic restructuring had just handed me the perfect opportunity to rebuild my career on my own terms while potentially devastating the company she was supposed to be improving. The disaster I'd been anticipating arrived sooner than even I had expected. On Thursday afternoon, I was finishing up my final transition documents when Jason burst into my office, his face white with panic. "Claudia, we have a problem," he said, closing the door behind him. I think I made a major mistake with the infectious disease protocols. My stomach dropped. What kind of mistake? Dr. Martinez from the Clinical Trial Coordination called this morning about the rapid response platform. He was asking about modification protocols for the detection algorithms. I thought he was talking about standard calibration procedures, so I authorized a 30% sensitivity adjustment. I felt the blood drain from my face. Jason, please tell me you didn't authorize that without checking the baseline parameters. His silence confirmed my worst fear. The infectious disease rapid response platform was our most sensitive project, a system designed to detect emerging pathogens in clinical samples within hours instead of days. The detection algorithms were calibrated to incredibly precise specifications, with sensitivity levels that had been fine-tuned over 18 months of testing. A 30% sensitivity adjustment wouldn't just affect accuracy, it would fundamentally alter the entire diagnostic framework. Worse, if clinical trials proceeded with the modified parameters, the results would be completely invalid, potentially setting back the project by years. How many clinical sites received the modified protocols? I asked, already reaching for my phone. 17. The modifications went out this morning. I immediately called Dr. Martinez, but the damage was already evident in his voice. Claudia, thank God you're calling. We've been getting completely inconsistent results since implementing the modifications. 3 sites are reporting detection failures, and 2 are showing false positives. What's going on? There's been a miscommunication about the protocol specifications, I said carefully. We need to halt all testing immediately and revert to the original parameters. Claudia, if we halt testing now, we'll miss our clinical trial deadlines. The regulatory review is scheduled for next month. The regulatory review. In my focus on the consortium presentation, I'd almost forgotten about the Food and Drug Administration review that was supposed to approve our rapid response platform for emergency use authorization. This review represented 2 years of preparation and potentially millions of dollars in revenue. Dr. Martinez, I understand the timeline pressure, but proceeding with invalid parameters will destroy the entire approval process. We need to prioritize accuracy over speed. After hanging up, I turned to Jason, who looked like he was about to be sick. Jason, this isn't your fault. You were put in an impossible situation without proper preparation. But we need to act quickly to minimize the damage. What do I tell Elaine? That was the question I'd been dreading. Elaine would have to be informed about the mistake, but her likely response would be to minimize the problem and push forward with the flawed testing, exactly the wrong approach for a situation that required careful damage control. Tell her exactly what happened, I said. Emphasize that halting the trials temporarily is the only way to preserve the regulatory approval process. Jason nodded miserably and headed toward Elaine's office. I watched him go, knowing that this conversation would probably determine whether Meditech could salvage any value from the infectious disease project. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Marcus Ellington, and his voice was tight with stress. Claudia, I just heard about the clinical trial situation. How bad is this? Bad, Marcus, but not irreparable if we act quickly and honestly with the regulatory authorities. Elaine wants to continue with the modified protocols and claim the inconsistencies are within acceptable variance ranges. I closed my eyes. It was exactly the wrong response, but completely predictable. Marcus, that approach will guarantee regulatory rejection and potential sanctions. The FDA doesn't tolerate data manipulation, even when it's motivated by timeline pressure. I know. That's why I'm calling you. We need your help to fix this situation. Marcus, I'm no longer an employee here. Any official involvement would require Elaine's approval. Then what do you suggest? I took a deep breath, realizing that this moment would define everything that happened next. I suggest you document everything that happened, preserve all the original data, and prepare for the possibility that this project might be delayed significantly. And Marcus, you might want to start thinking about whether your current leadership structure is equipped to handle this kind of crisis. The call from Kevin Walsh came at exactly 9 a.m. on Friday morning, just as I was clearing the last items from my desk. Claudia, we've accelerated our approval process. Cresswell Electric is prepared to make you a formal offer, effective immediately. I stepped out into the parking lot for privacy. What kind of timeline are we talking about? We'd like you to start Monday. Full authority over biomed research and development, unlimited budget for your first 18 months, and a signing bonus that I think you'll find quite attractive. The offer was everything I'd hoped for and more: Chief Innovation Officer, complete creative control, and resources that dwarfed anything I'd ever had access to at Meditech. But the timing felt almost too perfect. Kevin, I have to ask, is this acceleration related to what's happening at Meditech? His laugh was knowing. Let's just say that certain clinical trial delays and regulatory complications have created an interesting opportunity in the rapid diagnostics market. We'd like to move quickly to establish our position. Within 30 minutes, I was sitting in my car, reviewing a contract that would completely transform my career. The intellectual property clauses were particularly generous. Cresswell Electric was prepared to license my diagnostic innovations at rates that would make me financially independent while giving me the resources to develop them further. But the most interesting clause was buried in the partnership section. Cresswell Electric was prepared to offer consulting contracts to qualified biomed researchers who might be interested in transitioning from academic or corporate research environments. In other words, they were ready to poach the best talent from companies that had made poor strategic decisions. I thought about Patricia Reeves, our lead geneticist, who looked so worried during Elaine's reorganization announcement. About Dr. Martinez, who was probably dealing with angry clinical coordinators and regulatory officials. About Jason, who was almost certainly drowning in responsibilities he'd never been prepared for. As I signed the contract, I realized that Elaine's strategic restructuring had just handed Cresswell Electric the opportunity to acquire not just my innovations, but potentially the entire intellectual foundation of Meditech's diagnostics division. The consortium presentation was scheduled for Wednesday morning. I learned about the outcome from Marcus Ellington, who called me at my new office at Cresswell Electric. "Claudia, it was a complete disaster," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Jason tried his best, but he simply didn't have the background knowledge to answer their technical questions. When they asked about the European integration protocols, he had to admit he didn't know what they were talking about. I winced, imagining Jason's humiliation in front of 5 pharmaceutical executives. What was their response? They terminated the partnership discussion immediately. $48 million gone. But that's not the worst part. What's the worst part? 3 of the consortium companies have already reached out to us, asking for your contact information. They want to discuss potential partnerships with Cresswell Electric. The irony was almost too perfect. Elaine had eliminated my position to enhance operational efficiency, but in doing so, she destroyed the relationships that made efficiency possible. The consortium companies hadn't been interested in Meditech's technology. They'd been interested in working with me. "Marcus, there's something else you should know," I said carefully. "The infectious disease project delays have created regulatory complications that extend beyond just timeline issues. The FDA is asking questions about institutional stability and research oversight." What does that mean? It means they're concerned about whether Meditech has the expertise to manage complex clinical trials. If they lose confidence in your institutional capabilities, it could affect all your pending approvals. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "How much damage are we looking at?" "Potentially everything, Marcus. The regulatory authorities don't just evaluate individual projects, they evaluate the companies behind them. If they decide that Meditech no longer has the institutional knowledge to manage biomedical research safely, they could halt all your clinical programs." The silence that followed spoke volumes about the magnitude of what Elaine's restructuring had set in motion. As I settled into my new role at Cresswell Electric, watching Meditech's carefully built reputation crumble from my office window, I reflected on how completely Elaine had underestimated the true cost of experience, and how satisfying it felt to watch her learn that lesson through the spectacular collapse of everything I'd built.